I've occupied myself in a number of quite distinct areas of interest. But there's been one connecting thread that's helped to make each transition possible. That thread can be variously described as knowledge, understanding, education, or simply experience. What's certain is that everything, and I really do mean everything I've learned through my work in cinema, for UNICEF, and in various spheres of government, has only reinforced my view. In the words of the author and scientist H.G. Wells, the future's a race. It's a race between education and catastrophe. Personally, not finding the idea of catastrophe all that attractive, I decided some while ago to throw my lot in with education. W.B. Yeats was right in believing that education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. It may surprise you to know that as a UK parliamentarian, I'm one of well over 100 members of both Houses of Parliament whose past or present is intimately connected to this country. I'm also just one among over 100,000 UK citizens who've been fortunate enough to come and live amongst you, hopefully to contribute in some tangible way to this nation's future. In preparing for this morning's ceremony, my mind went back to what, at least for me, were two important, relatively recent events. The first was the historic address by the former Taoiseach to the joint Houses of Parliament, and the second was the opportunity I was afforded in August of that same year to deliver the oration at Beallan at the annual commemoration service for the death of Michael Collins. In his parliamentary address, having stressed his commitment to a plural and inclusive future, at the very end of his speech, Bertie Ahern said this: "Ireland's hour has come, a time of peace, of prosperity, of old values and new beginnings." That was pretty reassuring stuff 2 years ago, and despite the financial crisis of this past 12 months, much of it remains true today. This country has achieved a level of peace and prosperity that many of us would have doubted possible when I first arrived here 20 years ago. In fact, my very first public engagement in this country was the opening of Skibbereen's Welcome Home Week in the summer of 1993. And that evening, I remember vividly trying to articulate my acute awareness of the importance, certainly amongst my own community in West Cork, of family, of friendship, of community. Because it offered a very stark contrast to what I left behind in a UK that was still arguing with itself over what may or may not constitute a functioning society. But even then, I questioned whether that very special human glue that seemed to bind this country together was going to easily survive the pressures and the contradictions of globalization, as it was even then beginning to impact the whole of Western Europe. And speaking of Europe, I can't let the moment pass without saying that I really do pray that this nation has sufficient confidence and self-belief on October the 2nd to overwhelmingly reaffirm its desire to remain at the heart of the European project and not find itself relegated to the status of a bit player operating in the margins. But today I find myself asking the same question about that human glue that I believe binds us together, but this time I'm asking it with rather more urgency. And in the absolute conviction that were they with us today, many of those who fought and died to create this country would be equally concerned. They probably have understood rather better than us that old values and new beginnings are not natural bedfellows. The squaring of that particular circle involves a lot of difficult decisions and, from time to time, some incredibly tough choices. They, the founding fathers of this nation, wanted to help build something that was, as Michael Collins put it, not like other nations. An Ireland that could be, in his words, a shining light in a dark world. And that in the raw human material, forged out of 700 years of bitter experience, Ireland had the capacity to be exactly that. Now, all of my reading of these extraordinary men leads me to the inescapable conclusion that what they felt worth fighting and dying for was at the very minimum a country that was culturally and socially better and fairer than its historical oppressor. They knew that this nation's future would be principally determined by the qualities of body and mind and character of its people. As this morning's ceremony demonstrates, certainly to me, this is a country with a vast array of cultural talent at its disposal. It's simultaneously both ancient and brand new. It's a nation able to reach back into prehistory and to draw lessons from its treasure house of myths and fables and legends. And I'd argue that in a very important sense, it was only through constant reference to those legends that the concept of Irish nationhood was sustained and nurtured. In fact, I go further. It's my belief that as we approach the new and in many respects unknowable challenges of the 21st century, we're all likely to find ourselves badly in need of heroic examples to reassure us in our search for a resilient personal and national identity.